We got through ComicsPRO 2024, and apparently it was an enormous collaborative effort, and they've decided they're going to solve all the problems in comic books without actually addressing any of them. And I just don't think, Aaron Sparrow, that you can fix any of this stuff unless you admit why there's a quality problem, why people walked away, why people aren't buying your comic books. And it feels like they solved everything but what was actually the issue here.
Yeah, no, hey, they're going to solve those headwinds. They're going to push back against those economic headwinds, you know? The same thing that Bob Iger said, a year or 2 years ago? Oh, we have some macroeconomic headwinds cause some disruptions in our revenue. No, you're producing garbage. That's what caused disruptions in your revenue. And the comic industry is producing garbage, but they cannot admit that. And instead, they're going to say, we're going to hold the line at $3.99, except where we don't.
Heidi McDonald was there, and she covered it for Publishers Weekly. And she has another reason why comic books aren't doing so well. She stated the meeting came at a particularly unsettled time for the North American comics publishing industry. Graphic novel sales are down. Even mighty manga is slipping. And comics periodic sales are eroding as fast as the format's consumers are aging out and even dying off. A transition to a multi-distributor business during the pandemic following the decades of Diamond Comics as an industry's sole distribution option has meant many changes and questions. Like, is there any definitive proof that the majority of comic book fans are dying off? Like, where does this stuff come from?
No.
I'm sure some have.
I'm sure some have.
People die every day.
Absolutely. But, the problem is that you chased them off. Many of them are still alive. They just don't want to spend money on the crap that Marvel and DC are putting out. You know, some of us are still around, but we're just picking up indie titles here and there. We're not really like jumping in on the big two anymore. We've abandoned the Marvel universe. We've abandoned the DC universe. And why would we go back? Why would we go back to a place where you've got Tom Brevoort calling you cretins, when you don't like a book's direction? When you don't like his far left politics being crammed into the X-Men, and forced down your throat. And that's what you're going to get with this relaunch. It's going to be hot garbage. I don't even know why they're bothering. Putting Tom Brevoort in charge of that is the worst possible idea. I mean, aside from keeping Jordan White in charge of it, which would be an even worse idea. But it's just, there's no leadership. All of these people have been in their position too long. They're baked in with their biases and their hatreds and their old way of doing things. They have no new ideas, and it's time to push them out and bring in some fresh blood and maybe get these books back on track. Maybe bring these fans back, because they're not all dead. Your books are just dead to them.
It's kind of a weird idea. Like, Doc stopped buying and reading new comic books. They actually got him to stop buying X-Men and Spider-Man. He actually bought X-Men and Spider-Man even when he wasn't reading them, but they got so bad, he stopped going to his local comic book shop and supporting them by buying the books that he'd been buying essentially for 30 years. He's kind of getting into Ultimate Spider-Man, and he plans on going back to his shop. When he walks in, do you think the owner's going to be like, fuck me, I thought you were dead. We just assumed we were looking for your obituary.
What other reason could you have to stop buying comics? I mean, aside from Marvel and DC. And Doc was one of those. Doc was a whale, man. Doc was a guy who was buying every single variant of X-Men. You had him on the hook for every single variant until it got to a point where you did like a 1 in 1,000, and he was like, screw this, I'm not spending that money. I'm done with these schemes. They drove a hardcore collector like Doc out of the comic shops.
So did Doc die off, or did he age out? It's got to be one or the other, because that's the only problem.
Those are the only two possible options, according to Heidi. It's weird, because I thought, up until recently, Heidi was saying that comics were booming. They were doing better than ever. They were so great. And now all of a sudden, now it's okay because Heidi McDonald says so, to admit the truth.
We got to talk about the big victory that did occur at ComicsPRO. They've been talking about this one all week. ComicsPRO biggest announcement was the release of the Comet Standard, a voluntary system that will clean up the tangled web of metadata that all of the above players have been using for years, similar to how the book industry uses the Onyx standard to present uniform product information. The Comet Standard will take the current hodgepodge and spit out clean data that every POS system and retailer can sort in a variety of ways.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, this stuff started to happen a couple of weeks, maybe a month or so before ComicsPRO, and I have friends of mine who are in the industry who are work for some of these comic book companies that were saying this is a disaster. Like this is actually going to be a problem. Now I can't articulate exactly why that is because I'm not them. I'm not in there dealing with the metadata. That I have nothing to do with that. But they were expressing concern that it's actually going to be a bigger detriment than it is a help.
But that's what they've been working on for 2 years, not fixing the detriment as far as the quality going down, not addressing the fact that basically everything that could have been considered a superstar left DC and Marvel all at the exact same time, not addressing the fact that you have all these small publishers out there just releasing dreck across the board that nobody's interested in, flooding the market with a bunch of crap that isn't ever going to sell. They address none of the actual problems within comic books themselves, I guess, other than one, which is the hold the line at $3.99 faux promise from Marvel Comics, except for #1 issues and special issues. They will try.
Yeah, and we will determine what constitutes a special issue, which will be any issue that we decide we want to get more than $3.99 for.
It's issue 7. It's a goddamn milestone.
Or we'll make up fake milestones. Like, this is the 700th issue of X-Men. X-Men 35 is going to be the 700th issue. Okay, sure. Why not? And I'm sure that will only be $3.99, right? No, I'm sure it'll be more. And this metadata, like, who is this for? Who is excited about this? Brian Hibbs? Can we stop catering the entire industry to one dumb asshole? Can we stop that?
If you don't cater everything and the entire focus of the industry isn't on exactly what Brian Hibbs wants, he has heart attacks.
Good.
Truthfully.
Good. Then we will be able to say that people are dying off in the comic book industry. Heidi will
apparently, like, he types his newsletter with so much anger and vigor that he gives himself heart attacks just thinking about it.
He has to replace his keyboard constantly because he's driving his finger right through. I can't believe digital comics. They had an idea that they'd be cheaper because they're not actually physical. They don't actually exist.
Privately, many suggested that the surprising cooperation among industry players was because they have no choice. The comic industry is undergoing both overall media tumult and its own special problems. A new audience for comics periodicals is hard to find. Everyone badly needs data, including comparative sales charts and rankings. According to ComicsPRO's outgoing president, Jen Haynes of the Dragon in Gulf, Ontario, the big driving force of the metadata project was sales charts. Corporations want to say, here's how we rank in the industry. They have a vested interest in getting this information. If DC Comics and Warner Brothers wanted us to have the sales data, we would have the sales data. They would make it public. If Marvel Comics and Disney, the parent company, wanted us to have the sales data of Marvel Comics through Penguin Random House and Diamond, it would literally be out there. There's nothing preventing them from doing it. They don't do it because they literally don't need it out there. The only people that want sales charts for some reason, I guess, is Heidi McDonald, who thinks sales charts would make people think that comics were doing better than they are, even though people are upset with the quality.
We don't actually need, like, we, the public, we have a curiosity because, people like you and I, we like to track how the industry is actually doing. We don't want to take it from lying propagandists like Heidi McDonald, like Rich Johnson, people who are, disingenuous shills. We don't want to listen to them. We want actual raw data. But there's no advantage for Marvel and DC, especially at this point, to be putting out.
Why would they want to give their competitors their distribution numbers if they don't have to?
No one's going to go out there and do it and then be the only one, dropping their numbers. Do you think IDW wants you to know what their Star Trek comics are selling? No, God, no. They don't want you knowing that.
Certainly not. And the idea behind this is if they're all using the Comet Standard and the POS systems will be the same, how many retailers are out there that are going to freely give all their sales data away to a third party anyway? Because you're going to have to get it from them.
Well, it's bad enough that they have to go through Lunar, a distributor that is actually competition to them, that actually, runs a service that is in direct competition. So now Lunar has all of their data. They know exactly what the numbers are of the comic shops that are competing with them for those comic dollars. That's bad enough. They're not going to want it out there for everybody. Every single line that they do with every single, distributor that's out there. They don't want that data out there.
Yeah, to get these sales charts and using the POS system in Comet Standard, all the retailers in America are going to have to freely send their data, which will now be formatted the exact same way. That's the advantage.
Yay. And that's what a great thing for the industry to focus on right now. That's where the problems have lied.
As if you're going to get 3,000 retailers or 2,500 retailers, or maybe it's down to 2,200 retailers to all be on the same wavelength and just give over their data. They're not going to get 500 people to do that, let alone majority.
If there's anybody in the industry that's dying off, it's comic book retailers, because you've got these old school comic book guys that are still struggling to get by with the terrible product that they're being given by Marvel and DC. They're the ones that are hanging on. You don't see a lot of young people going out and going, let's start a comic book store. They're too smart for that. These poor guys, they got in the industry when it was smart to do so, when you could actually, sell the product and make a decent living and have a good time doing something that you enjoyed. And that time is long past for a lot of people.
Do you remember Mark Miller, obviously the famed DC Marvel writer that does Miller World, got the Netflix deal and all that stuff? Not that long ago, we had that retailer summit, when you had the owner of graham crackers, you had Phil Boyle from Coliseum Comics, and another guy that was from Ohio. How many of them ever were like, man, we don't have a standardized way of uniformly filling out information for point of sales data? They never mentioned that once with the stuff that was actually affecting them. It's like ComicsPRO doesn't even listen to their constituents and the people that are paying their dues for it.
Well, the companies don't listen to the retailers, their customers. They don't.
Yeah, but ComicsPRO is funded by the retailers. They're the ones that pay the dues for the whole conference and everything.
Yeah, and this is what this is. It's like the government, man. It's just they take your money and they spend it on something that you don't want, something that does not help you in any way.
And you know what the worst part is? It wasn't that long ago that Mark did that panel. I think it was in November, maybe. One of the guys is already out of business, already had to close up his shop.
Oh, is that the one that Heidi had to go and hold hostage?
No, those guys were in New York. I believe this guy was in Cleveland, but I might be wrong on that one. But this was a friend of Mark's that he's known for some time. And a couple of months after appearing on and talking about the ills and what was going on with comic book retailers, he had to close up shop because he couldn't continue to be a comic book shop functioning with the state of Marvel and DC right now.
I keep saying on this channel and on other channels that I go on, if you're a comic book retailer, less than 10% of your revenue needs to be generated by new comics. You need to transition into other stuff. You need to have a robust back issue supply if that's what if you want to stay primarily a comic book shop. But otherwise, you got to be selling anime statues. You got to be selling action figures. You got to be selling Pokemon cards and Lorcana cards. You've got to diversify because comics are not going to support you. And it's just going to get worse. It's just going to get worse because nobody who's in power, Jim Lee, C.B. Cebulski, Tom Brevoort, none of these guys have any ideas or any real interest. They're just running out the clock. They're taking a knee and they're running out the clock and they're collecting a check for as long as they can before this all comes to a head. They don't care anymore. Tom Brevoort used to seem passionate about comics. He seems so disconnected now. He just seems to not give a shit. And we know he doesn't give a shit about the X-Men because he told you that. He has more interest in writing an 87-paragraph Substack calling customers cretins than he does putting any kind of effort into the creative endeavor of creating good comics.
This is the final thing that Heidi had to say in the Publishers Weekly article. There was also publishing news. DC has a big summer event coming from writer Mark Waid and artist Dan Mora. Marvel floated a horror series with bloody covers, and a former DC executive, Jeff Johns, presented his new Ghost Machine imprint and image. Manga publishers Kodansha, Viz, and Yen all presented, and Boom's president, Philip Sabolick, delivered one of his trademark uplifting sideshows, this time adapting a Ted Lasso quote, "To unite the troops, comics is life," proclaimed his final slide, and for many, it was not far from the truth.
Oh, first of all, F you, Heidi, you bloated tick on the ass of the comic book industry, and your bullshit propaganda. Philip Sabolick coming out there with your rah-rah speech. Comics aren't life. Comics are on life support. And part of that reason is because of people like Heidi McDonald. I'm so done. I'm so done with all these propagandists and their bullshit. Just admit that everything is going wrong. And the reason that it's going wrong is because you chased off the goddamn customers. And what are you going to do? You're going to put Mark Waid on an event? Great. There's a lot of people, you and I included, who will not touch that event because we decided that we're walking away from Mark Waid. He said he would rather see the comic industry burn. And I was like, well, I don't want to support that guy. No. And I think actually I think he further clarified his his statements this week. I saw some stories out there, and if I'm misquoting, please forgive me, because I did not watch the videos or look into it further. I just rolled my eyes and moved on. But apparently, he was saying that he doesn't want to ever have to work with anybody who's right wing. So anybody who has anything but the most far left political ideology of Mark Waid, he cannot work with. What a ridiculous man he is. Not even a man. What a ridiculous little boy.
You don't think a big event from DC is going to save the industry? What about polybagged comic books with a couple of extra pages with some blood on it?
Ooh, variant interiors. Variant interiors. That'll be the great new thing. Yes, extort your customers further. Piss them off more. Good strategy.
Well, they got to double penetrate your wallet, because it's $5 for the issue, or I guess it's $6 for the first issue of Blood Hunt, $8 for the polybagged bloody issue, and then $5 and $7 for the subsequent 5 issues of Blood Hunt. A 60 issue Marvel event with Marvel heroes fighting vampires, and apparently one of them really isn't Blade. Makes no sense to me.
Well, Blade's daughter is so much more.
Well, Bloodline is a big part of the event.
Yes. Yeah. Fantastic. No, you're definitely right. We're definitely, comic book fans, comic book retailers definitely getting double penetrated. They're basically just have us on a rotisserie now, where we just go around and go around. And until retailers rebel, until they say we're not doing this anymore, until customers rebel, and customers have been, they're leaving in droves. That's why Heidi thinks we've all died. This is why the industry is failing. But it's going to continue to fail until there's an outright rebellion. But none of the retailers band together and seem to have any interest in pushing back and making the industry healthy again. So, I hate to quote the Joker movie, but you get what you effing deserve.
I did hear a little rumor. I don't know if this is true, but I sure hope it is, that Heidi was actually supposed to present something at a small panel there. And then they actually had to remove her because they didn't want to get all the retailers upset. That's what I was told. A pretty reliable source. So
that's pretty good. I like to hear that.
If somebody can confirm that would be chef's fucking kiss. You know what I mean?
Well, you know what? That's a step in the right direction. Heidi, Rich, these people need to be shunned.
The retailers don't like her either. They know she's full of shit.
Yeah. No, they absolutely do. Look,
and you know what they won't do with these sales charts, Aaron? They won't do sales charts by units sold. It'll always be by dollars, because the dollar numbers keep going up. And they'll always keep including stuff that weren't comic books last year in the new charts and all that stuff too.
Yeah, no, they're pretty sure Pokemon cards and things like that will eventually be comic books, according to these people, just so that they can keep pumping up those numbers. But yeah, what we need to know what units sold, but they don't want that out there. And certainly they don't want that out there, because then a Disney or a Warner Brothers executive might actually notice the numbers, and instead of just looking at the bottom line, might actually go, wait a minute, what are we doing here? Why are we spending all this money to get so little return?
I imagine a lot of you are out there going, wait, what am I doing? I need more Aaron Sparrow in my life. I like the cut of his jib. You were not the only one. If you would like more Aaron Sparrow, this podcast is the Geek Fix, and it lasts for well over 2 hours. And this is just a brief moment in time of that podcast. If you want the full thing, you've got to go over to the Patreon. There's a link in the video description for more Aaron Sparrow, Doc, Jim, and myself.